we have a very, very special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself, who you are?
Hello, my name is Ivan Egan, and currently I'm working as a commercial airline pilot.
Awesome. Today we have prepared this bit of an interview to answer the most common questions the students might want to ask a real pilot in the line. So I have prepared 10 questions. So are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So question number 1. How much training do pilots receive?
How much training do we receive? Well, that varies. Usually a lot. You can be sure that throughout your flying career, you will always receive some form of training. So be that through the company that you work for, or your own training that you do at home, or just through experience from actually flying every day.
Okay. Question number 2. How much money do pilots make? Are pilots underpaid, overpaid? What is your opinion?
Of course we're underpaid. Yes, there's never enough money, obviously. But how much do we make? Well, that depends on the job that you're doing. Obviously, if you're working as a flight instructor, then of course that can be very, very little. I remember when I was a flight instructor, I was earning maybe 15 or 20 US dollars per hour for flight instruction.
Really?
Yeah, really. Right up to the large airlines, where of course you could be easily earning in excess of 100,000 US dollars per year.
Okay. Thank you for answering such a sensitive question. Question number 3. What are the advantages being a pilot?
Advantages? It's an interesting question actually. Obviously, when you're in the job, the advantages don't quite seem like advantages, but I guess they are. You do get support from your company. They do help you throughout your career and your career development. Obviously, if you have a family with you, then they do offer support in accommodation and medical issues with that, which is good. And of course, the larger airlines will perhaps also give you a pension as well. So there's a lot of financial advantages to being with a larger company. Other advantages can be, of course, the perks, certainly travel perks. So if you haven't had enough of flying during your work, then of course on your time off you can travel again and take your family with you. So that's the main perk that we tend to have.
And do you have to pay for the flight fare, or is it free by your company?
It depends on the company. Sometimes it mainly is discounted, so it can be 90% or 50% discounted. And sometimes they can be free, of course, but it does depend on who you work for.
Question number 4. What are the tips to find a good flying school? And is it expensive to become a pilot?
Expensive to become a pilot, that's relative, of course, because it depends on how much money you have to start with. But generally, yes, it can be expensive. Not as expensive as perhaps becoming a lawyer or a doctor, but certainly expensive in financial terms. As a rough estimate, it could cost you up to 100,000 US dollars to get qualified from zero to a commercial pilot. And choosing a good flying school, that's very subjective, because that's going to be down to you. The essential ingredient you want is somebody who actually understands you, and somebody who can actually hear what you're saying and understands that you're spending money with them and you want value for money. But you don't want to be put into, if you like, an industrial machine and just churned out. You need to make sure that your training from the word go is the best that you can receive in terms of how you see it, not in terms of the reputation of the school, but how you see it.
Great. I believe there are European license and there is US license. How should students choose which one to go for?
Okay, you're licensing what you want to get at the end of your training. This is actually a very important question, actually, which is something which is very overlooked. Now, in various countries around the world, each country will have its own governing body. So the Americans will have the FAA, in Europe will be EASA, and then the Africans will have their own, the Russians will have their own. And it all depends on where you want to work or where the work is at that time. So if you wish to work only in China, then all you need is a license from the Chinese governing body. If you want to work in the United States, then all you need is the FAA license. So start at the end, which is where you want to work, and then get the license appropriate to that. For myself, I found the FAA, the American license, to be worldwide, widely accepted. So once I had that license, it wasn't a problem to go and get a job in another country that was accepting the FAA license.
Okay. All right. Well, talking about your accent, where are you from?
I'm from England. I'm from the United Kingdom.
But you chose to learn your flying in the States.
I did, yes. I chose to learn my aeroplane flying in the United States. For me personally, I found that system to be the cheapest, actually, but also it gave me the most value for money. And of course it was a widely accepted license. So it was good quality flying. There was lots of flying, lots of hands-on. Some people may criticize that the American system because it's less on the book technical side of things, whereas the European one is heavy on the books. So I went for the practical side of things because I wanted to fly and I wanted to know how to fly.
Right. Okay. Question number 5. How many hours are required to become a first officer and also eventually a captain?
Okay, the hours, this is absolutely critical for what you need for your future career. Hours is everything. So right from the word go, you need to get your logbook, and you need to start filling out your logbook from every single hour that you get, from the first day in an aeroplane to, even for me now, at 30 plus years of flying. So hours for a first officer. That really depends on the governing body that you're learning with, and particularly the airline that you're flying with. So for instance, first officers in the United States, when I started flying, their requirement was only 250 hours total flight time.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very, very low. However, if you join one of the larger airlines in the Middle East, they might require something more like 4, 5, or even 6,000 hours of flight time. So it does depend on the airline that you're going for, and obviously the bigger the airline, the more impressive the airline, then the more experience they need. And the only measure of experience that airlines have is the number of hours you have in your logbook. And the captain, again, that depends on the airline that you're with. Usually airlines hire you as a future captain. So that you come in as a first officer, you spend a number of years in the right seat, and then as you develop your experience and you pass the various training and exams, then they'll offer you the captain position. So once again, that depends on the airline. In the United States, they were captains at, I believe it was 1,500 hours or less when I was going through, and the larger airlines, again, in excess of 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 hours, depending. So the more hours you have, the more chance you have.
Talking about the logbook, you mentioned that it's important to log down every hour that you spend on the airplane, right? Do you have to get that hour certified once you record it down, or is it just like self-trusted hours that you write down manually?
Okay. At the moment, the hours that are recorded in your logbook, you do that yourself. And throughout most of the governing bodies, it is kind of a gentleman's agreement that what you write in your logbook is true. There have been cases of hours in the logbook which are perhaps slightly less than true. So people have been doing that to try and sort of bolster their application towards an airline. Please don't do this, no matter how much the temptation is, because it will come through eventually. So if you claim you have 6,000 hours and you fly like you only have 1,000 hours, it will be completely obvious, and yeah, that's not a good idea to go about it.
Question number 6. What is the most important factor to become a pilot, besides being honest?
I think myself, the important thing is the ability to be humble. Yes, you must have the ability to be humble in front of others. You must be prepared to be wrong in front of others, and therefore be able to accept feedback. This is more of a character trait, and I suggest this is, to me, it's the most important thing, because if you're humble and you can receive feedback, then you develop not only as a person, but you develop as a pilot. So if you perform a maneuver that is incorrect or it's wrong, you need to know how to repeat that maneuver to the correct standard. And the only way you can do that is by listening to the critique that you get from your instructor, your examiner, your chief pilot, or even your captain, or perhaps even as a captain, from the first officer. Just because you're a captain doesn't mean that as a first officer you don't have something to offer. So being humble in all aspects of flying, I think, is, to me, it's the most important factor.
Cool. Moving on to question number 7. Are pilots overworked and tired? And how many hours can a pilot fly per day?
Yes, of course we're overworked, absolutely. Yes, we work far too much. And tired, yes, is the short story of that, actually. Back in the day, long-haul flying was obviously considered to be very, very exhausting, very, very tiring because of the time zone changes. And of course, as businesses have become more successful, the management, of course, have tried to, let's say, exercise us as crews more and more and more. So it can be difficult. Are we overworked? That's up to you, really. Do you feel overworked? That depends, and it depends on your other aspects in your life. Perhaps if you have a family, children, girlfriends, all of this can add up into your overworked life. And of course, if you don't have any of that, then you have all the time in the day.
Okay. Do you feel tired?
Do I feel tired? On and off. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. If I come back at, say, 4 or 5 in the morning, definitely I'm going to feel tired because I've been up all night.
Right.
So, but fortunately, I don't have too many distractions at home, so I can get some good sleep and I'm ready for the next flight.
So talking about how many hours you're allowed to fly per day, are you able to calculate that? Is there any rules how many hours you can carry on per day?
Okay, so that will now depend upon the company that you work for. And the company you work for has rules that come down from the governing body. So if you work for a US carrier, then the FAA will dictate the number of hours that you can operate or work in a flight. Generally, for a small to medium airline, you'll be limited to something like 8 hours a day. Now, that might only be flight time of 8 hours a day, but of course you've got the preparation before and the post-flight duties afterwards. In the US, it can be very, very difficult. So if you're rostered for, say, 2 or 3 flights, that might take you to, say, sort of 6 hours flying time, which you get paid for, but your actual time of work can easily be double that.
Wow. What about the airline you're currently working for, which is based in the Middle East? So based on their governing bodies, how many hours can you fly a day?
Again, that will tend to, well, for the airline that I work for at the moment, that varies massively depending on the type or destination that we're actually going. So if I'm doing a short flight, on average, depending on the time I start, it could be a 12-hour day or a 13-hour day. But of course, if it's a much longer flight, say we fly all the way to the United States, 16 hours. So that means we take a heavy crew. So that means there's at least 4 of us. So there'll be 2 captains, 2 first officers, and then 2 will take rest for half of the flight, and then we'll swap over, and then just before the landing we'll swap back again and repeat the whole process on the way back.
Okay, interesting. Where do you sleep on the airplane?
Where do we sleep on the airplane? Anywhere we can. Usually the airplane will actually have its own dedicated crew rest. So we call them a CRC, or a crew rest compartment, or a bunk for short. And the airplane I fly at the moment has 10 beds upstairs, which are fairly spacious, so long as you're not like a big guy. I'm getting a little large, so that bunk is getting a bit small for me. So yes, you can take a rest up there, and then when it's your duty time, put on uniform and head down to the office.
Okay. All right, moving on to question number 8. Is flying safe? Are bigger planes safer than the smaller ones?
Is flying safe? Of course it is. Otherwise I wouldn't do it, correct? So
Okay.
yes, flying is safe. Obviously it's not 100% safe, because at the end of the day you're taking a metal tube, a pressurized metal tube at high speed through the atmosphere, where there's very little oxygen. So the environment you work in is not good for health. So there are always risks associated with flying an aeroplane, particularly when you're operating complex computer systems and flight controls. And of course, the biggest problem to safety is Mother Nature, the weather. Okay, it's very difficult to kind of differentiate between the two, because most airliners will have complex autopilots and backup redundancy systems and automation to make things safe for you. So long as the operator, the captain and the first officer, as long as you operate that within its limitations, of course it's safe. But again, if Mother Nature decides to make things, let's say, a little tricky for you on the approach, then of course you need to be ready to see that problem and avoid the problem before it even gets to you. So yes, it's safe. I wouldn't say that bigger planes or smaller planes are safer than anything else.
Okay. I think that kind of leads to question number 9. How does the autopilot work?
Okay, autopilot, or his nickname is George. So he tends to take pretty much 95% of the workload for us. He does that because if we engage the autopilot in the cruise, it enables us to monitor the other systems and the situation that's happening around us, particularly with weather. So George is there to help us in our flying. He's not there to replace us, he's only there to help us. Now, how does the autopilot work? Basically, it's a computer. And what it does is it controls the aircraft flying controls, and we tell the autopilot to turn left, right, go up, go down, or go fast or go slow. So we manipulate the computer in the flight deck, which then tells the flight controls to do what we want. And we can, and the aircraft I fly, we can turn that autopilot off at any time, so it doesn't override any of our controls if we need to intervene. But as I say, 95% of the time, the autopilot is flying and does most of the work for us.
All right. The last question, number 10. Do pilots ever get scared?
No, of course not. Absolutely not. No, we wouldn't get scared. It would be wrong to say, do we ever get scared? Yes, of course we do, because you need to have that healthy reaction of fear, apprehension, about whichever phase of flight you're actually doing. Even if you're going for an exam, or you're preparing for the flight, or you're in the flight itself, you need to have that, because it acts as if you like, an alarm bell for you that something is perhaps not quite right. So, for instance, if you're flying towards a thunderstorm and you're not scared because you've seen it 100 times before, then it's time to review your thinking, because you should be scared of thunderstorms, or you should be scared of flying the aircraft too fast on the approach, because you're now pushing the limits. And that's something that I'll just touch on there, and this goes with the scared thing, is you'll hear a lot about aircraft limitations, and that's precisely what they are, is limitations. Don't go beyond them, okay? So it's not a target, it's a limit. The analogy is, it's a bit like driving your car. when you drive your car down the highway and you see the speed limit at 80, it's a limit, not a target. So if you apply that to all of your flying, then you and your passengers will be 100% safe.
That's a very easy way of explaining it. Thank you very much. Well, that's it for today. Thank you very much for coming to the studio to give all these important answers. And if you really enjoyed today's interview, please do click like. And if you still have not subscribed, please do hit the subscribe button as well. All right. Thank you very much, Marvin. And I hope to see you again soon.